What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the first video in the new house and in the new workshop. If you guys saw my last video, it was just a little bit of a life update and how we sold our other house and moved into this one and gave you just a small tour of what we got going on here in the new garage. We got a ton more space. I just got a outlet put in for my welder, so I'm ready to start doing some projects. The first project we're gonna get done is a little bit of a refreshment on the Tacoma. We're gonna be rebuilding the front end, new upper and lower control arms, as well as some Marlin Crawler LCA gussets, a cab mount relocate. We're gonna be cutting the fenders and also putting on some new lock off-road wheels. Just give you a little rundown of the parts we're putting on. This is the Marlin Crawler lower control arm gusset kit and also cam tab gussets. The lower control arm, the pivots on these, if you get your alignment done, they like to get knocked out of place. Mine have not currently been knocked out of place, and that's probably because they are completely rusted in place. It's a common problem on the Tacomas, so we're also going to be replacing the lower control arms. The bushings on my truck are factory with 227,000 miles on it, so I figured I'd go ahead and do a complete refresh. I've done the lower ball joints before. These are from Freedom Off-Road. This is basically like an OEM replacement, so no other advantages over the factory setup. I just want something that's going to last miles and miles and miles and be reliable. Really no need to do any sort of long travel or uniball setup. I'm not really a big fan of uniballs. They have a shorter service life compared to a regular ball joint, so we're sticking with kind of like an OEM plus tried and true setup here. I did come with new lower control arm pivot bolts. I'm probably going to go get some new OEM ones from Toyota though. Kit also came with Freedom Off-Road uppers. This is a factory style upper ball joint and bushing setup, so once again longevity in mind here. They do add some caster to help with the lifted truck because I have about 2.5 to 3 inches of lift on the truck right now. I did purchase these. They were not sent to me. I just did a little bit of research and decided I wanted to go with this kit and try them out. We also have our C4 fabrication cab mount relocate kit. So these are some plates that'll get welded onto the frame, and then these mounts will replace the factory ones. The reason we are doing that is for tire clearance. I am on a 34-inch tire, which is a 285, 75, 17, and I think it comes out to be like a 34 by 11.5, but I do rub the cab mount quite a bit in certain situations. So we're gonna go ahead and do the relocate to get a tons more clearance. And then also at the same time, we're doing the C4 fender liner kit. So they give us a template, which I'll give you a little more details on this stuff later, but essentially we're gonna be cutting the fenders and still retaining a fender liner. Last but not least, we are running some lock off-road wheels. They reached out to me and asked me if I would like to run their wheels on my truck, and I got to looking at their website and I really loved the Baja. You guys will get a better look at how this looks on the truck. We went with a matte black versus my usual bronze. Really excited to get those on and show you what they look like. We're also going to be running some counteract balance beads. I did purchase these. They were not sent to me. I've used them in the 80 series Land Cruiser on the 37-inch tires to balance them out, and they've worked great. Enough to where I feel confident enough to try it on this set with the wheels and tires. I can just balance these normally at work. I really don't like doing stick-on weights or anything. They end up falling off, especially when you're doing a lot of off-road stuff. So we'll try out the balance beads. I'll let you guys know how they go. They've in the past have worked out fantastic for me. When I first started this project, I only anticipated the truck would have been on jack stands for maybe 2 weeks, and that was before I realized I was going to take this a whole lot further than I expected and refresh a bunch of stuff all around this truck and really give it the love that honestly it has deserved after being such a good truck for many years for me. Alrighty, we got the truck up on the jack stands. We got our wheels in the back for safety and our other jack up front here. So just taking a look at the front end of this, I've been running the Bilstien 8112s up front for a few years now, and they've been fantastic, and I'm still going to continue running them. I'm going to clean them up a little bit when I get them off the truck, wipe them down, and just kind of make sure everything is looking good on them. The service life on these is pretty extensive, so I don't think I'm going to have to do a rebuild on them or anything. I'll probably message Ian from Wheel Every Weekend and kind of get his opinion on it because he is the shock dude and who I get all my shock stuff from. You can see in the past I've added a spindle gusset, currently running JBA upper control arms. They've been on there since 2016 and well over 100,000 miles. No complaints at all with them. And I really could have just rebuilt those as well and continued to run them. But that kit with the upper and lower on the Freedom Off-Road was cheap enough that I just figured I'd go ahead and swap those out, and then I'll keep these arms for maybe a future build or something like that. Here you can see our cab mount and where it's been rubbing all this time. So this is the whole reason I'm doing the cab mount relocate. I've done a pretty aggressive chop on it and it still rubs pretty good, as well as on our fender. So our fender kit will end up cutting a lot of this fender out of the way, which I've also had some rubbing up here, and it's popped my fender liner or my fender flare off a little bit. So we'll be resecuring that and just kind of getting everything all tidied up in much better shape than it has been, because it's been a little while since I've really gone through everything. It's all mechanically sound and tight. It's just a good thing to go through and do a little refreshment. I'm sure many of you may not know this, but full-time Monday through Friday, I'm actually an auto tech. Me and my dad run an auto repair shop. So doing this portion of the rebuild is just kind of a normal day for me. And you'll notice I bounce back and forth between sides as I'm working. And that's because you can do two sides almost as fast as you can do one. While you already have the tool in your hand from working on the driver's side, for example, go ahead and bounce back to the passenger side. And in the end, it really speeds things up, especially when it comes to front end work. Going into this, I already expected my lower control arm bolts to be completely seized up, so I had bought some Sawzall blades in preparation. Here I went ahead and tried to just pull them out just because, and as I expected, they were all seized up. Here in the next part of the video, I'll describe the methods I used to remove them. All right, we got both sides completely apart as far as the suspension goes. Just to give you guys may have seen on the time lapse what I was doing, but these lower control arm bolts, like I previously mentioned, famously get seized up. And essentially that means you cannot remove the bolts at all because the sleeves just get totally seized inside the other metal sleeves on the lower control arm. The easiest way to tackle this is actually with the Sawzall. So what you do first is cut the arm off. So obviously these used to be attached here and here. Cut the arm off and get it completely out of the way. And then after you do that, get in here with the Sawzall and cut on each side. And by cutting on each side, afterwards you may have to get the angle grinder, do a little cut and kind of pop some things out. But you don't have to worry about spreading your ears or really just kind of messing up the overall shape of your lower control arm mounting points there. I went through about 3 of the Diablo Steel Demon blades. These are awesome and pretty much the only thing I would ever try to use to cut through metal. I know it was sped up in the time lapse, but it cut right through the lower control arms pretty fast. And then it also, for what we were cutting through as far as being bolts and stuff like that, and cut through the other stuff fairly well. Still just got to remove the upper control arms from our spindles. I may go ahead and clean these spindles up and do a fresh coat of paint on those while I'm here. Before I took the front end apart, I did check to make sure my wheel bearings were in good shape. And of course our lower ball joints are going to be new and our upper ball joints are going to be new. Tie rod ends were good as well. So no other suspension components really need to be replaced at this time. I think next up, I'm going to go ahead and start getting our Marlin Crawler lower control arm brace and gussets welded on. And then once those are all welded on and this is ready to go back together, then I'll go ahead and start working on our cab mount. It'll be easier to get the cab mount done while this is all out of the way, so there's not a big lower control arm and everything hanging in our way. So on our front side, they give you these little metal pieces and everything just kind of ends up fitting where it's supposed to go, and honestly almost just kind of holding itself in place. So you can see that kind of locks in. This lower piece kind of locks into place and helps everything just be held when you go to do some tack welds. But for the front, we'll have one on the back here, as well as this one on the front. And then this front plate, as you can see, is pretty much keyed to just fit right in here with a little bit of wiggling. And you can see it just kind of holds itself in place. The front is really easy and self-explanatory. The rear, I did have a few questions, even looking at their website, just because they didn't show a bottom side view. These are pretty self-explanatory. They just slide right on. And then we got this big hunk right here. My main question was orientation. And from what I see, the fat side of this thing goes towards the rear of the truck. So this may be hard to see here, but this kind of butts up here and you see how it surrounds our cross member and then also butts up to our gussets up on this top side. So we'll be able to hold this in place and tack everything in. But first thing, now that we got everything kind of mocked up here, I'm going to take a Sharpie, draw some lines on where I need to clean off some metal. Cleaning these tabs up to get it welded on was actually a little bit tricky. It's just kind of a hard space to get into with an angle grinder. I think maybe honestly a die grinder with a little like diamond ball wheel or something like that to get all the paint off would be much easier, but you can get in there with like a wire brush on a drill and angle grinder if you end up working at it. From here, I got all of our gussets tacked in place and then fully welded in. This would have been much easier to do on a lift just because there's certain parts being laying under the truck trying to weld. Your face is just so close to the weld that you end up getting hot sparks dropping on you. So totally possible here on the ground, much easier on a lift. We got our LCA frame brace and gussets all welded in and painted up. What I used is some VHT roll bar and chassis paint. I actually have coated the frame with this pretty much, I think it's been years now at this point, and it's held up really, really good. So I decided to go with it again. You know, usually I like to use Steel-It, but Steel-It's pretty expensive. I have good experience with this stuff. So I figured I'd go ahead and give it another shot. You see there's still little spots here, which I'm gonna have to hit with a wire wheel and coat the frame, but I've gotten the majority of what I've already welded and stuff like that just to get the bare metal all covered up. So I'm gonna have to pick up some more cans of this stuff and we will coat the rest of the frame here. And then of course, we're going to be coating this part of the frame where our relocate is going to be done as well. Next up on the list is the C4 cab mount relocation kit. This is all part of the tire fitment kit that I purchased from them that came with the fender liners and everything. They ran a little more of a deal if you bought it all together. What we have here is the plates that are going to be welded to the frame. And then these are going to be what are replacing our factory cab mounts and giving us a lot more clearance for the tires. They do supply you with some energy suspension bushings, which is nice. New hardware and washers and nuts and all that. We'll kind of get into that a little bit later. As far as removal of the factory cab mount, I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot on using this 9-inch Diablo Steel Demon Sawzall blade. As you guys seen from the lower control arms, it cuts right through that stuff. So I'm thinking it'll kind of make some short work of these cab mounts. And then of course some grinding discs, because we're going to have to sand down little bits of the old factory mount to make room for our new plates. The idea with the Sawzall blade is you can see we have a bit of a gap here that our blade can still kind of come up through. So hopefully I'll just be able to take my blade and make a cut all the way across here and get the bulk of this mount out of the way. And then of course with those angle grinder discs I just showed you, we'll be able to smooth the rest of this out. Before we can start to do anything, we're gonna have to go ahead and get this mount unbolted. There's a nut on the bottom side here, and I believe it's a 17 or a 19 just by feeling it. And then inside the cab of the truck, if you pull a couple little trim pieces, we got our one piece here and then our other kick piece, pull our carpet back, and you can see the top head of the bolt here, which also appears to be a 17 or 19. I believe it looks like it's going to be a 19 millimeter. So the goal here is we're going to loosen the nut on the bottom. We can slide our factory bolt out. And then once the bolt is out of the way, we're going to space up our body about 1/4 inch from where it sits now. When you weld on your new cab mount, if you bolt it up with exactly how it's sitting now, and then you let the weight of the truck sit, it'll actually sink it about 1/4 inch lower than you'd like to, according to C4's instructions. So we're going to follow what they say and space our cab up 1/4 inch from where it sits factory. And you can do that by wedging something in between your slider and your pinch weld. That'll probably be the easiest method. Or of course, you can just use a floor jack and jack up your cab until you get about 1/4 inch higher, and then leave the cab there while you're getting your cab mount off and everything. And then when we go to mock up later, it'll be in the exact position that it needs to be for you to tack everything in place before you do some finish welding. Alrighty, with our bolt out, they were both 19 millimeter, so 19 millimeter head and a 19 millimeter nut on the bottom. You can see now we got about 1/4 inch space up here from where it was resting from the factory. And that's exactly where we're gonna want it for whenever we tack up our other mount. What I did to achieve that was actually just shove, this is just an inch piece of aluminum stock that's left over from the camper build. I took a pry bar and I figured probably right here is probably the best place as far as leverage goes, and pried up on the body and then shoved our piece of aluminum in there. And that is just gonna keep our height completely set exactly where it needs to be while we go ahead and chop and clean all this other junk up and not have to worry about wondering exactly where the body has to sit later. So now we'll get our Diablo blade in the Sawzall and we'll get to cutting. Although cutting the bulk of the mount off with the Sawzall goes rather quickly, the most time-consuming part of this whole job is just grinding away what's left of that cab mount. Mainly what makes it a little hard is just getting into the tight space. As you can see, the cab of the truck is really right in the way of you trying to get that upper part of the mount. Alrighty, we got our factory cab mount off of the truck. You can see this is our first initial cut that we did, and you can see how much junk and just dirt and mud and debris that was just stored in the bottom of our cab mount. And I really thought I was cleaning it out good with the pressure washer and everything, but it just goes to show a lot more is stored in there than you think. So if you have factory cab mounts still, get in there and make sure yours are nice and clean. See, this is a 2011 truck, so it's been going in mud and off-road and dirt and stuff like that with me for almost 10 years now. And just over time, the collection of that junk has trapped moisture. And you can see it's just started to kind of rust the frame. The good news is we are going to be plating all of this right here. So this is a perfect opportunity to go ahead and fix the damage that's already been done, sitting there for all this time with all that junk there. Some other preventative steps we are taking with our new cab mount is this is the side that's of the plating that's going to be facing the frame. And I've gone ahead and coated that with a coat of Steelite. And you can see I've done the bottom and insides of our new cab mounts as well. The reason why I'm using Steelit for this part is because Steelit is weldable. So even though I got all these surfaces coated, particularly these edges and all in here, I can still weld all of this stuff to the truck with no issues while still feeling like I have good coverage as far as paint goes. Of course, once everything's welded on, it'll still get a whole new fresh coat. Likely the final coat will still be with that roll bar and chassis paint I showed you before. I'm also going to be using some Eastwood Rust Encapsulator Plus, and this is going to be what gets brushed onto that part of the frame. And I'm only using the rust encapsulator for that because there's already a little bit of rust present there. So I'm gonna clean out and get rid of every little trace of rust that I see and then paint the encapsulator on there just to stop it from spreading further, and then weld this plate on top of that. So it should make it so I don't have any just bare steel all kind of buried behind this mount that's just gonna continue to get rusty and just become even more of a problem later on down the road. So what I've done here is kind of pick at and cut out any of the bad rust chunks. We want to leave just the good metal left. After that's done, I did a stencil of our plate and then painted that with our rust encapsulator before we got our plate and mount final welded on. Alrighty, we got our mount all welded on. As you saw in the time lapse, I did my plate first. It was easy to hold the plate in location with the C-clamp like this. I got this side tacked down, and then just to make sure I had no gaps or anything, I took my C-clamp and moved it over here and then tacked that side. Once we had that plate welded in, we could then mock up this mount with our bushings and our bolt and our nut and everything, and basically just tighten all of this up and have it sitting exactly where it's going to be. Hold it tight against our plate, do some tack welds, pull the bushing out so you don't overheat them, and then go ahead and finish weld all this in. There is a small brace that they give you to put inside here. So that's kind of the reason I painted the inside of this with Steelit. So then when I went back and added that, it was super easy just to take some needle nose pliers, hold those up in there, tack it in place, and then do some finish welds in there. Now that this is all cooled down, before I put my bushing and bolt everything up, I'm gonna go ahead and clean up all the surface rust on this part of the frame and kind of get everything ready for me to lay a coat of the roll bar and chassis paint. And then we can move on and do the exact same thing on the driver's side. Rinse and repeat on the driver's side of the truck, with the only difference being this side had a little more rust than the passenger side did. I ended up cutting out quite a bit more and actually adding in a little plate so we had something to weld to on the bottom of our plate for the cab mount. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you'll have seen all the stories where I kind of detailed and outlined my fix on this part of the frame. All right, that is a wrap on our cab mounts. You can see we also got our driver's side all welded in and everything painted, and we coated it with that roll bar and chassis paint. Another thing we've done is added some bump stops. So old bump stops were from Wheelers Off-Road, and I had them cut with the Sawzall to work better with the Bilstien 8112s. These bump stops are from Perry Parts, and I've been running their bump stops on my 80 series Land Cruiser for a while now, and they've held up awesome. And these bump stops are actually designed to work particularly well with the 8112s because the 8112s have a built-in hydro bump. So when you go into full compression, the shock itself is going to be basically your bump stop. So these are designed to allow the shock to do its job while still functioning as a total stop at the end. Because if you had no bump stop whatsoever there at the end of the stroke, you need somewhere for it to stop. Otherwise, it would just have way too much up travel. So these will work very well in conjunction with the 8112s, and he's got plenty of other bump stops out there that work with any other suspension system you want to run. And he's also got stuff that just caters way better than these companies that are selling one bump stop kind of fits all situation. He can definitely cater to your needs much better. So once again, Perry Parts bump stops for the win. Definitely recommend checking them out. It's a real quality product at an affordable price. His company's really blown up over the past few years, and I really can't recommend him enough compared to other companies that are out there selling bump stops for these Toyotas. Pretty much next up on the list is to start getting our fenders cut. We're still waiting for our shocks to come back in. I actually have pulled the front bumper off the truck as well, so we got the front bumper off and the rear bumper off, and those are going to powder coat. So we should have those back in maybe a week or two's time, and that gives us plenty of time to start cutting the fenders and doing all that fun stuff. So here in the next step, we'll go ahead and rip the factory fender liners out because we'll be replacing those, and then we'll start looking at the kit and seeing where we need to put those stickers they give us on here to figure out where our cut lines are. I always wanted to do a fender cut on this truck. I was just hesitant because I did not want to delete my fender liners. If you delete your fender liners, you get a bunch of dirt and mud and junk all up in your fender wells, and it just makes it super hard to clean it out. Here on the East Coast, obviously we see quite a bit of mud at times, so not having the fender liners just really wasn't an option for me. So C4 having this kit, when I saw it came out, I knew eventually I was going to go ahead and get that and do this cut. And of course, them also having a stencil to help you cut the fenders in an aesthetically pleasing fashion was also a plus. All right, we got both of our fender flares all cut. I did this side first as kind of practice, and then I was going to go through and give you guys a step-by-step here on the passenger side. And I ended up getting a little bit carried away with what I was doing, and I kind of forgot to film on this camera. I did film some vertical stuff just because I was posting some Instagram stories as well. So I will throw in a clip real quick showing when I had all of the decals on here that guide you on where to cut. Let's see, it's just a big sticker you put on your flare. It's got some locator tabs here that you line up with the edge. So that's how you know you're in the correct position. Let's see, there's another one right there and another one down there. So line all those up, it's 3 different pieces. And then now with our angle grinder, use a small disc. We got a perfect line to cut all the way through here, and it makes it nice and simple. So yeah, their stencil makes it super easy to get a nice clean cut, and also just to kind of get that nice radius that you want. Obviously, if you're just trying to freehand this, it could be a little tricky to just find the cut that's going to end up looking the best. Once you get through your flare, then you have to also cut your actual fender on the back side. First thing I did was take a Sharpie and make a mark using our plastic flare as a guide, and then you go through with a good sized blade and you can make your cut on the fender itself. You can see that little tab at the very top of the angle grinder kind of rests against the flare, and it almost works out real well because you can use the flare as a guide when you're going around cutting. Obviously this is a little bit of a tight radius. You got to pull back and do some cutting with the angle grinder like this to get in there, but it's definitely very doable. I wore a welding mask while I did this just because the amount of shavings and plastic and metal and stuff that just gets thrown right in your face just because of the way you have to hold this thing to be all accurate. So definitely wear full face protection when you're doing that. It's definitely not worth getting something in your eye. But overall, this was pretty easy. I mean, I got both of these sides cut in probably like less than an hour, and that includes like the filming. So overall, nice and simple. Once we are done with the initial cut, I went with a flap disc and cleaned up all of the edges and kind of rounded the shape and perfected it as I wanted. You can see here, this one's a little flat. I'm gonna go through and kind of round that a little bit. But it's nice, and you can even take some sandpaper by hand and finish all these edges. Of course, you are cutting a metal fender and you're gonna have an exposed metal edge. So what we're gonna be using, once again, is Rust Encapsulator Plus, and using actually just a little Q-tip. Q-tip and dabbing it all along that edge and making sure that we don't have any bare metal left at all to end up rusting on us later. One quick thing before we get our fender liners in, I'm replacing all of the clips for the fender flare. So this is the fender flare that we just got done cutting. You can see I've removed it from the truck. It's as simple as taking some needle nose pliers and pushing the little tabs on the back side and pulling all of our clips out. Now for replacements, on Amazon you can get these bulk clips. They're not OEM, but in the reviews end up saying they fit as good or better than OEM. And they do come with these little styrofoam little donut things which you can put on there that help tighten things up as well. You can see on this one, for example, you just slip it over the snout of it there. It helps things become more solid. So I'll go through, replace all the clips on each side, and then once that's all done, I'll get our flare snapped back in place, of course, once I clean all this off, and then we will start installing the fender liners. The plastic parts of the fender flare that retain the clips are actually not attached very well. It's pretty thin plastic. Some of them did break loose, so I just had to plastic weld those back on. For installing the fender liners, there's a couple key components. One of them being this bracket that actually just bolts to an existing fender bolt. So you just pull that bolt out, and I just kind of centered the bolt up on the bracket, and it ends up lining up good enough. This has a rib nut on it, so then we can put our fender liner up there and bolt it through the hole right there. With our fender liner up in position in the truck, you'll notice this bracket that's kind of hanging out here. And what that's going to do is actually hang right on this plastic clip here, and that keeps the fender liner from being able to sag or go up and down. They also do give you a bracket that ends up going right here if you'd like. I've already put the fender liner on the other side, and it's so solid, I'm not even going to end up doing it. But what you could do is do a riv nut in this hole and then do here and then just go ahead and bolt it up. That's totally optional. Once you get it in there and bolt it up, you'll see what I'm talking about as far as how solid it is. With aftermarket kits like this, sometimes you just never know how well they're going to fit. Thankfully, this one ended up fitting really well. With our backliner in, you can see we got her bolted down. They make this such a tight fit, which is a great thing because our gasket just keeps the fender up nice and tight here to keep it sealed up. And then of course this is pretty tight all through here. You're still gonna get some water and mud through there, but it's gonna be way better than not having any liner at all. That bracket I was talking about can go right here. But as you can see, this isn't even all bolted up yet. And it is solid. I do have that backing plate that I showed you stuffed behind the two liners, and these bolts are just finger tight. So these aren't even all the way tight down yet, and it's still already this solid. Go ahead and tighten these down, and then they do give you another bolt that basically bolts through factory spot here. So tighten those down, tighten this bolt down, make sure all your bolts are tight, and that's it. The fender liner is actually super easy to install. And I also had some leftover of the trim here, and I undid this bolt and pulled this out and added some here on both sides of the truck as well. And then I took the big hammer and kind of beat back some of this stuff. I think I am going to take some black spray paint and paint the inner fender well. I probably should have done that before I put the fender liners in. I'll probably also either paint those black, or I'll just hold some paper or cardboard up and just kind of hold it and mask it a little bit as I go. In the end, this fender well is going to be covered in stuff, so not like it really matters. Alrighty guys, it's probably been a month since I picked up the camera to do an update on what's going on with the truck. While I've been waiting for my shocks to get back, I've done a few other things to the truck. I've got my powder coated bumpers back on. We went with some DOT Baja Designs for the fog lights. Previously I had just the regular sports, which you can't really run on the road because they just blind people. We replaced our light bar with a Baja, I believe S8 30-inch. I did get that used from a friend, so I got a good deal on it. We've torn out our old rock lights and we've put in some KC Cyclones. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I've been doing story updates about every little thing I've done to the truck since then. Because this video would have ended up being 2 hours long if I showed everything I did, I've kept the video just about the front end parts, but I just kind of want to go over just some stuff here. Did a winch cutoff switch here by our battery, which is what I honestly should have done a while ago. We have completely painted and coated the frame on the inside and out all the way back to the rear here. We have not done the rear just yet. We have cut our rear fenders here to match our front. I just measured how thick the front fender flares were and then just transferred that to the back here, and it matches where our bumper ends, which is pretty awesome. We mocked up a fender liner. So this is just some ABS sheeting that I just kind of made a little DIY fender liner because the factory ones had to come out to cut the fenders. Once again, if you've been following along on Instagram, there was much more detailed stories about all that stuff. Once I get the front rebuilt, I am going to go ahead and coat the rest of the frame back here and get some other stuff dialed in. We got our rear bumper on, that was powder coated as well, and we moved those Baja Sports that were up front to the rear of the truck and got all of that stuff wired in. We still have to wire up our rear rock lights, but for now, that's just a quick overview of the extras that I've done. Now we're going to start assembling the front end of the truck. First thing we're going to do is get our Freedom Off-Road lower control arms in. We got all new OEM hardware. I did take pictures of where my cam tabs were before I took the truck apart, so I'm going to reference those pictures and put it back about where it was. Since it's going to be the same exact ride height, everything should be pretty close. I am still going to go get an alignment though. So we'll go ahead and get the lower control arms in, we'll get our rebuilt shocks in, and then we'll start getting our upper control arms and our new splash guards and all that good stuff in there and get this front end all put back together. As you guys know, the reason we're replacing the lower control arms is because these lower bolts were seized in the sleeves themselves. So I am putting a liberal amount of never seize all over these bolts before I slide them in there in hopes that they stay unseized for me for years to come. Some other bolts I'd recommend doing that to is the lower shock bolt, which I did have issues to, and pretty much any bolt that is going to live inside of another metal sleeve, particularly if you live in the Rust Belt. I'm just in Virginia, so I'm kind of just on the edge of the Rust Belt, and we still have these issues. If you're in the Northeast, definitely do this to your truck. Honestly, no matter where you live, it's a good idea just to keep rust from forming. All right, we got both sides assembled and it's looking so much better. Everything's nice and refreshed and clean. The bumpers really kind of help tie everything in. Did torque everything down to spec. I'm gonna put up a little screen here on the left side and it's going to show all the torque specs for every part of the suspension component that I had actually messed with. One part that is not torqued yet is our lower control arm bolts. Those will be 100 foot-pounds for the rear and the front. Upper control arm is going to be 85 foot-pounds. And because this is an OEM style bushing and not a floating poly kind, we will have to torque with the vehicle's weight on the suspension. If you torque it while it's up in the air at full droop, the bushing is under unneeded stress while the vehicle is then sitting. So what we'll do is we'll get the wheels on the ground, and then we'll torque our lower control arm bolts and our upper control arm bolts. Got the truck sitting on its own weight. Everything is torqued down to spec in the front. I was able to just torque it with it on the ground. Not having my skid plates on definitely made that a whole lot easier, having access to my lower control arm bolts. I am going to throw my skids back on, but I am going to do it at the shop where I have a lift. It'll just be a little easier. They're just kind of heavy and awkward. Also, I want to take this thing to go get an alignment. Before I do that, I'm actually going to take it for a little test drive, see if the steering wheel's still straight. I can check tow here at the house, make sure that's set, so we're not just going to wear our tires out on our way to get an alignment. But it's looking awesome. I'm loving the new wheels. It is so nice to just have an all black set of wheels for a change. Usually, like I've told you guys in the past, I'm always running like a bronze wheel. These Lock off-road wheels just, I mean, they're absolutely awesome and clean and simple, and really happy that I chose these from their lineup. I do have a bunch of other wheels on their lineup though that has beadlock rings and a whole bunch of other styles. Pretty much anybody can find something they like looking at what they got. I don't have a coupon code or an affiliate link or anything like that, but you know, if they ask how you heard about them, just go ahead and say ADV 4x4 sent you. And once again, huge shout out to them for sending me these wheels. This is definitely really awesome. Not something I expected to get somebody to want to send me a set of wheels, but really thankful that they did it. And of course we got our one on the back here. Can't have the center cap in just because of the way this is set up. But normally we have our trash rear on the back for camping. But overall, this is just looking almost like a completely new truck. I'll give you guys a little look front and back as far as the stance goes with these wheel specs. So they're 17x9, -12. And you can see it sticks out just a bit. My bumper sticks out quite a bit. So if you're comparing it to the side of the truck and the fender, that's about what the poke is on front and back. And I think that's about perfect. You don't want it too aggressive just because it'll sling a bunch of junk all over the side of your truck. And also you run into issues with tire clearance. One thing now looking at the truck like this, I do kind of wish I went to 35s. I think 35s would look absolutely awesome on this truck. If you think I should do 35s, drop a comment and tell me to go ahead and do it. Maybe something I'll run this for a little while. When I first got it down on the ground and looked at it, I was like, man, really regretted not going to 35s. But now that it's on the ground again and I've looked at it a few more times, it's just the fender cut, having all that extra space is what's making it look like that. Something else to note is I do not have my skids on. I don't have any camping gear in the truck. It's pretty much empty. So once it's completely loaded down, it will kind of go down a little bit and not look like it's sitting so high up. We also did get the sliders painted. I just did the roll bar and chassis paint. Just a nice fresh coat on there. That'll be easy enough to touch up if I'd like as I go along. The rear of the truck turned out awesome. I think I might have already showed you guys this, but everything is looking so fresh and clean, which is a really big change compared to what this truck's been the past few years. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I know this video is a little different from the camper build video, so hopefully it wasn't too boring for you guys. Some of you guys that have been around for a long time know I tend to bounce in between, I guess, topics in a way. So there for like a year, I was working on the 80, and then of course I was doing the truck camper build. Before that, I had done the micro camper build and the other trailers and stuff like that. So right now we're working on the Tacoma, obviously. We're getting the Tacoma all set up. Next up, and probably the next video, is gonna be our back seat delete. I gotta rework that whole situation because now we got a kid. So we gotta make room for a car seat while also still having a nice secure place to store a fridge. So, and then the one after that will be probably the electrical system on the camper. So we're doing a house battery and all that good stuff, a solar panel on the truck camper build. So that should align pretty well with what you guys want to see as far as I'm imagining. And then we also are going to do some little stuff, like we're going to do some bug screens. That way we can have the back door of the camper open and have a safe place away from bugs for the baby and just for us if we're out there in the summer and it's super buggy. So hopefully some of that stuff sounds interesting to you. We also have, after the Tacoma is kind of all set up, Land Cruiser, as you guys remember my last video, I talked about I am going to go ahead and do an LS swap on that. I do have an LS motor already at my house. So things are in motion there. There is some pretty unfortunate news about the 80. got in a little bit of an accident. If you guys follow me on Instagram, I had a Dodge Ram 1500 hit me in the 80 series and tear it up. Waiting on insurance to come look at it. It's fixable though, so we're gonna get it fixed first, and then we're gonna LS swap it, and it's gonna be an awesome truck. So be sure you guys stick around, and thanks again so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.